Hey everyone, my name is Reniscore and I'm a current Challenger support player on the North American ladder. In this video today, we are going to be talking about my favorite champion, Pyke. Pyke is an insanely high-risk, high-reward champion that has to perform consistently well in order to win his games. In this video, we're going to start with a basic overview of his abilities. If you feel like you already have a hand for that, skip ahead, go to the next chapter. That's where we're going to start talking about more advanced tips for his abilities. Just basic overview of his abilities. By the way, we'll be maxing Q almost every game, and then I would max E second, Q, then E, then W, then Alt. Let's talk about Pyke's passive. So any of your damage you take from a champion gets stored as gray health, and while unseen by enemies, you rapidly regenerate the stored damage. So a lot of times you could just walk into a bush in lane, or your W also stealths you and will heal you if they're not inside this ring. Which, by the way, this skin's great for learning Pyke because, for one, you can really see the edge of the ring really easily, and then you can also see his E, which we'll go into next, really easily and way better than the other skins, including the base skin. So his Q, you charge up a bone skewer, throw it. It deals a good chunk of damage, moves the enemy towards you, and then applies a 99% slow. Now you can also tap it. It'll do the same exact effect, same slow, same damage, but it won't move them. Pyke's W, he gains camouflage, which, as you see, when they are close enough, they have the pink eye. That means they can see you. You get an exclamation point. Same goes for pinks. If there's a pink in a bush, it'll appear and it'll show an exclamation point above you. You get a burst of decaying move speed. So I'm at 447, I W 620, and then it counts down. And again, the W is also useful for the passive to gain your health back. It's also how you'll reposition a lot of times in fights. You know, if you're fighting, you can easily W around. Let's go on to his E, Phantom Undertow. This, you dash forward. There's a trail behind you where you've dashed from, and it'll drag forward and stun everything in the line. Now, it's a little bit harder to see with this skin what it actually is, where the part is that's dragging. But in the base skin, you can see like a ghost basically follow behind, and this one, it's a little bit harder to see. But they get stunned as that portion, that back part, passes over them. So we're going to talk it all out about this ability a ton in the next section, but just know that for now it just deals damage and stuns. Pyke's Alt, to go on to the next thing. Death from below, Pyke will jump up in the air. You have an X. As long as they hit any portion of the X, it counts. If they're below a certain threshold of health, that it has a nice little marker, by the way, when it's champions, it will execute them and give, if there's an assisting ally, it'll give the other person 300 gold, or it'll give you 300 gold based off of who actually got the kill and who was the assisting person. If there's multiple allies, it'll give it to the last ally to have done damage if you kill them. So if like 2 people hit this and I kill them, the last person to have hit before I ultied gets the gold. And it also teleports Pyke to the center. So if this hits, you jump to the center of the X. And that is his basic abilities. And then we're going to really get into the nitty gritty here on the tips for the actual abilities. So, and the first thing I really want to talk about, his Q can pull over walls. His Q pulls a set distance, however, no matter how far away you are. So if I put a guy here and I hook him, and then I put a guy in the exact same spot, I walk up next to him and hook him, they will land at the same spot. So the pull distance is the same no matter where you are as Pyke. That's important to know, because if you're on top of someone, it means it'll throw them further away, so you can't auto. But it's also important because when you're pulling people over a wall, it means For one, it means you can throw it from anywhere. And for two, as long as the set pull distance pulls them over the halfway mark of the wall, if they would land on this side of the halfway mark, they'll land here. If they would land on this side of the halfway mark, they'll get pulled over. So technically you can extend the range a little bit. Look how far that Q was. That Q is, look at that pull distance. That's way further than the actual pull distance. That's because I got it to where it pulls them just over the halfway mark. So it shoves them to the other side. The next thing I want to talk about is Pyke, his Q, and along with some other skill shots in this game. At the end of it, if you cancel it a little bit early, it makes a tiny, it adds a few pixels on the left and the right side of it. You can hook things behind other things pretty easily, and when you get used to it, it helps you throw hooks in the minion wave. It's so also notes, obviously you have to talk about flash interactions. Your Q, you can flash as you're charging it. You cannot flash after you throw it. That's one note. Second note, the tap. The tap has a delay, right? You can flash the tap, and this is important, and a lot of people don't do it enough. But you can start your Q and flash the end of it. Saw that? It still goes the direction you place it. So make sure you know. Don't like aim backwards and expect it to hit. For the W, the only thing I really wanted to talk about is using your W properly is actually super important. If you have Umbral, you need to be using your W to extend the area covered by when you're Umbral or when you're sweeping. If you have Sweeper and you press Sweep, you need to press W with it, because look how much more ground you get to cover. Sometimes even if you see a ward, like if a ward's right here, I'll W and I'm W and I'll acknowledge it. I'm watching my sweeper bar right there, and then I'll go back, clear the ward, and then I know where all the other wards are and I can mark them for my team now. But yeah, using W for max effect of those will really help how much of the map you can clear consistently. Also, W is your way of warding. If I'm walking up here, I'm probably not going to just walk like this and drop a ward. I'll probably do this and drop a ward. Also, it's important to note that the enemy sees when you're close with a little effect underneath them. So a lot of times if you're going to W into a lane, you either wait until the very last second to give them as little warning as possible, or if you think a bush is warded, when you hit the part that would possibly be warded, you W before it, and then you have to E as soon as they kind of get that effect around them, and again, give them as little time as possible. W is a really strong tool that I think a lot of people don't realize is as strong it is. Getting around the map quickly and pretty safely, I'll add. If someone is in a bush and once they can see you, you instantly get that little exclamation point. You can instantly, like, you know, if I'm walking towards this bush and I see it, I can just bail. Like, there's no point in me saving a cooldown, so just be safe. Use your W to get around the map and give them less time to react to things. The last thing I want to talk about for the W is if I can't get there in time, you can W to increase the range of your E. So you can E outside of range of their vision, and if you have Mobies and you have Relentless stacks, I don't have any right now because I don't have a way to get them. You can easily E outside of vision, and if they walk forward, you can easily hit a stun, or if you have flash, or if you're building prowlers, you can close the gap. That's about it for the main purposes of W. So just using it to get around the map, very crucial. Just note it gives them that that effect. So if he's doing that camp and I W over here, even though like he doesn't know I'm over here, he knows I'm in the area now because I pressed W. So just be aware that W can give them a signal that they wouldn't normally have. So just be smart about it. Think it through. Let's move on to E, the Phantom Undertow. This is your bread and butter, you know? This is where a lot of your kills and flashy plays come from. So, as you've already seen me do a few times, the E can be flashed, obviously. It can be redirected. If they flash, I can then flash. It can be moved with prowlers if you do it quick enough. And see, now I did a swoop with prowlers. Again, that's why I don't really recommend it, because it's super hard to do. I'm not even great at it. See, that time I missed. I did it too early and it pulled right here. So I would drop in a tool like this and just play around with it and see if you even like it. Because again, I wouldn't recommend it. I'll put it that way, for new players at least, especially. A common thing, like first blood, is you hit 2 first, you start charging your Q, and what happens is when you start charging your Q, the enemy starts trying to dodge. This works in like challenger lobbies, by the way, so it's going to work in your games. You E forward, start charging it, and then you can flash while charging your Q. Remember earlier, you can flash while charging Q. But in this sense, you have your E going, so you can just start it, flash it, and walk right there, and throw them backwards. And then now they have to flash, they'll land like right here next to you. You use your Hail Blade autos and your Ignite, and it's almost always the first blood if you get it. But it's important to note, when you do it, you don't get enough time always to walk fully around. A lot of times you get like here. That'll pull if you angle the end of it right. So I would just practice that. Just practice moving down, coming to the edge, and throwing them backwards as quick as you can. A common use of the E is giving your enemy less time to go from your ult. And then another use is if you ult over someone, because you teleport to the middle of the ult, you can drag your E over them and stun them. So we just closed that gap to there, stunned him, and didn't miss a point of damage in our kit. So you can start seeing how things, you know, really all work together. But that right there, practice it, be able to do it. You'll get first blood almost every game because of it. There's very, very few matchups that Pyke doesn't just straight up win at 1 and 2. Because look at his base armor, it's super high, and then between your passive, it's a lot of sustain, a lot of damage reduction early on. The other thing you need to do is you need to practice going over walls, because Pyke C is kind of short, right? But again, you get over that halfway mark, you can start going over walls that really you shouldn't be able to, but... And then this one in particular, there's a very strange angle like that, where you can get a really far dash. And this is a lot of times how you escape people when you're escaping as Pyke. Your E itself is not enough. You need to use walls to really extend it. This is one I like to practice. This one is super important. So they could be here. But just so we can see, they could be there. And you could be level 2, you're just shoved in, so the wave's crashing back, it's meeting in the middle. If you learn this, you'll get a lot of first bloods that way. It works in Masters, it works in GM, it works in some challenger lobbies. Like, people don't suspect it. So just be able to do this. The spot's like right around there. The other spot you need to be able to do, the safest way is to come right here. It's just not out of the bush. But you need to be able to do that, especially if like you're up here and you're getting caught or something. You need to be able to come down here and E over without getting a tower shot. It also lets you, you know, take a pretty good flank. It's the same thing Rek'Sai takes. If you ever play Rek'Sai, this is a very common gank route for bot lane. But again, if you're escaping, always use your E. Like, I'll cast it, I won't go like this. If I'm running that way, you know, angle it. That way you use the wall as much as possible to extend your E. There's a lot of walls. A lot of practice. Next, we're going to talk about the ultimate. Obviously, we talked about your ult as an E-stun. We need to talk about your ult as a jump. A lot of escape routes use that. If you're trying to escape a lot of times, you're being chased. You can throw someone towards a wall and use them as an escape. But make sure you just clip it, and not like I just did, and fat finger it way up here. Because again, if that center like that is over that halfway mark, it's going to pull you to the other side. And that is pretty much it for the ult. You know, just learn to use it to jump. Even if you throw people over the wall, or if you throw them over, you can just ult on top of them. Otherwise, you can just ult like that and use it to jump. You'll see Davemon do that a ton. But yeah, general tips, you know, just think where your ult will put you. And that is going to be it for the ability section, the advanced ability section of the Pyke kit. It's a lot. It's a lot you have to practice, but you need every ounce out of this champion to win games right now, so I highly recommend doing it.
Let's go over what I would consider probably the most popular build. It's going to be Halo Blades, Cheap Shot, Zombie Ward, Relentless Hunter, Bone Plating, and Unflinching. This is probably the most common build and probably the most recommended. And we're going to go into each one and really talk about it. So Halo Blades, the 100% a must, to be honest. I would never do the Aftershock build, to be honest. I would never recommend it to anyone. Halo Blades is all your early damage, and it's honestly how you get pretty much all your kills pre-6 is going to be from Halo Blade damage. It's how you trade in lane. It's how you really push people out of lane. It's how you find your roam kills. It's how you can push junglers off of camps. It's really the bread and butter of your early game, because you're stacking as much AD as possible, as much lethality as possible. You're spending no gold on attack speed, no gold on anything else. You're really kind of just flat AD. So having quick 3 attacks is really where a lot of your damage is going to come from. Cheap Shot. So I like Cheap Shot personally. When you throw somebody, you throw your Q and hit somebody with it, it's going to technically impair them and basically give you a tiny bit of extra damage in those first few levels, which really can end up being kill windows, because that could be the difference between like a pot of HP almost if you get enough cheap shots off, because the cooldown's actually pretty low, so every Q or E will probably proc it unless you overlap them. Zombie Ward. So Zombie Ward is a biggie for one reason alone, and that's because we're going to be building Umbral Glaive super early on Pyke Support. Umbral is super strong. Pyke abuses it like no other support can. He abuses it almost like no other champion in the game can, because of how much movement and how much he relies on it to make sure he's safe moving around the map. So this means you're going to be clearing a ton of wards. This does 2 things. This gives us early AD, and then this gives us extra vision, right? So we're going to be clearing a ton of wards by rushing Umbral. So we're going to have a ton of early attack damage, and we're going to be having a lot more objective vision through the Zombie Ward itself. Going into the last section here, we're going Relentless Hunter. I would say this is probably the choice 99% of the time. There's probably moments where you can make an argument for Ultimate, or if there's a really broken item in the meta, sometimes Treasure Hunter can be good if you need to get to it first. We're getting to Umbral, so that's probably not the case. Relentless to get around the map. Out of combat mobility is easier to come by on Pyke because of Pyke's W and how you kind of reset in fights a lot. So the extra move speed, you'll honestly really miss it once you start getting used to it. So definitely take Relentless Hunter. Now for secondary runes. Secondary runes on Pyke, there is a few options. The most common is, like I said, a lot of people take Bone Plating and Unflinching. Bone Plating, it works somewhat nice on him sometimes. Let me put an asterisk on it, because Bone Plating is just flat damage reduction, right? It's 30, 30, 30, or 60, 60, 60, whatever it is at the time. And Pyke has no bonus health, and this is one of the only ways to get tankier is through your runes. The downside is once it's broken, if it's broken in like an inconvenient way, if like you get hit by a Janna auto, it's only going to block Janna's attacks then, so then you're going to take full damage from their AD carry or whatever, you know? So some people take it. It just kind of matchup dependent in my opinion. Second Wind used to be the go-to, but it got a little bit of a nerf, but it's not terrible either. If you think bone plating is not looking great, you can go Second Wind. As for the last tier, Revitalize does not boost how much we heal from Gray Health. It just boosts how fast you heal from Gray Health. So we're not going to take that. Overgrowth, we'll get extra AD, but we actually won't gain any bonus health, so it's pretty bad. Unflinching, the Tenacity and Slow Resist. So it's important to know on Pyke, Slow Resist reduces the slow you put on yourself by charging your Q. So this means at the max stacks, 20% slow resist means you're going to be having 20% slow resist against your Q slow as well. So you'll move faster while charging your Q. And it can really throw people off sometimes if they know, like, play against Pyke a ton and learn the micro, movements and stuff. Sometimes it can really help you out. And Tenacity is good always because it's Pyke. That's usually the only time you die is in some kind of CC. For the runes down here, it's almost always going to be, actually, it will always be adaptive armor. It's good to note that Pyke's base armor is very high. It's one of the highest in the game. So if you're in an AP lane, make sure you switch this over to magic resist. That's the big if, right? If it's like even like a 70-30, 60-40 kind of lane, I would probably still lean towards the magic resist because his base armor is so high. In a standard lane where you're taking this armor versus AD carry, you're going to be taking very little damage early on because of the extra armor, because of your passive, and that's where a lot of your early laning strength comes from. So make sure you get your runes right. So if you're going to play for your lane, if you think for whatever reason you're just not going to make as many roams in a game, maybe you're looking at double tank top or something, or who knows, maybe you're even just playing with a duo and you want to stay towards lane, this is probably what you're going to aim for. Is you're going to take magical footwear just so you can buy an early Dirk and not have to buy tier 1 boot. And then you're going to do one of two things. You're going to either take Biscuit Delivery or Cosmic Insight. I personally like Cosmic Insight for the lower Ignite cooldown and the lower Flash cooldown to create more windows where you will have your Flash E combo and your opponent will not. And then Biscuit Delivery, the mana cap is really what you're aiming for. It has a little bit of lane sustain in it, but really you're aiming for the bonus mana. So that way you can take less recalls, spend more Ws, more Es, and just stay on the map more. That's basically it. Usually you don't ever take anything in sorcery. Again, 90% of the time I'd say I'm in here in Resolve. I have tried out pretty heavily Inspiration, and I will say it has some merit to it. The Precision build I would never do. The Aftershock build I would never recommend currently. The Aftershock Even Shroud build is fun, but I definitely don't think it's the best. And I think Pyke is not strong enough to not need the snowball effect of the AD Halo Blades builds.
So Pyke's build kind of changes in the way of at what point do you build your boots, and that really comes down to the game itself you're in. A lot of times if you're hard stomping your lane, there's a middle ground, right? Because if you're hard stomping your lane, building for lane kind of doesn't help you because you need to use that gold to win the map then. Now what does that look like? Sometimes if you think you're really winning, you can just rush on Mobies. The goal is we go Umbral first, boots, and then so last season in season 12 I was going into either Maw or Death Stance. Death Stance got pretty heavily nerfed, so I don't think it's really viable anymore. So now I'm pretty much, my second item is either kind of Maw or my Mythic. And if Maw is your second item, then your third item probably should be your Mythic. Basically what that means is your build can either look like this for the majority of a game, or it can look like this for the majority of the game. You very rarely hit the third item, to be honest. We try to through gold generation, through our ult, but really you want to start off Umbral is the goal, because the earlier you get Umbral, the earlier you can start clearing wards, the earlier you can get the AD bonus, and the easier it is for you to take over the map at that point. Because the vision control is what really gives you the objective control that you're looking for as Pyke. A lot of times we'll have buys that are like this on first recall. A lot of times I'll have a buy that is boot, longsword, refillable in control ward. And then usually I'll control ward either the edge right here or the edge right here. But we don't buy too many control wards past that. One early, just so my mid can play safe and make the trades he needs to, depending on his matchup. But I should talk about refillable, because refillable really does a lot for support Pyke in particular, because you do take a ton of recalls, Moby Boots, and Relentless, combined with your W, lets you take a ton of recalls because you can constantly move your ward line around. You have a very, very fast out of combat move speed in this build, so you need to be taking a lot of recalls and moving your wards around a lot. So we take a lot of recalls. Refillable basically makes up for at the beginning of the game, for the most part, it makes up for whatever healing your passive doesn't. So, because, you know, Pyke, when he's near someone, takes 40% reduced damage, basically, because that's how much he heals back from his passive. You also have these two refillables giving you 200 health, and it just keeps you on the map for a lot, because look, I only have 670 health. Let's see, even if I'm like level 3, when I might take my first recall, only 800. So that's 200 out of 800. That's, you know, 25% of my health right there every time I recall, or before I need to recall. And we can't get bonus health. This is the only way we can add health to our pool. So a lot of times in fights, I'll even, as soon as I lose a single HP, I'll pop a potion if I have to, if it's a fight. Using your refillable properly is honestly a skill set, I'd say, that not many people realize exists. And then from there, the safest thing, if you're not sure where to go with your second item, is to just build a Warhammer. It goes into everything. It goes into your Maw, it goes into Ghostblade, it goes into your Mythic. If you build a Dirk instead, what if you need Maw? You're crossed out at that point, right? So if you don't know, just go Warhammer. It's the ability haste is good anyway, and usually at this point you don't need the extra lethality compared to the ability haste anyway. So if you don't know yet and you're not decided, just go Warhammer for now and then go from there. You're probably thinking, why go into Maw? Because then you will never reach your Mythic, most likely. Well, staying alive and getting off more abilities is the ultimate goal. So if, you know, they have a 3-kill Syndra with Ludens, like, it doesn't matter if you have Duskblade effect, right? It's worth noting that if you are worth 1,000 gold, because you're snowballing and hitting a ton of ults, which it's very common as Pyke to be worth 1,000 gold, it's worth noting that gold in the wrong hands can easily like turn your game that you've been working so hard to snowball. So stopwatch into GA, even second sometimes, if you've really snowballed, is kind of worth it, because you want to protect that 1,000 gold. You want to end that game still worth that 1,000 gold. It sucks because you're such a squishy target, but it's one of the cons of Pyke.
First thing we're going to show is just the straight up level 1 combo, which is really where you'll find a lot of your early game flashes, blown and summoners blown. It's just a Q triple auto ignite. The ignite is kind of up to you depending on the matchup, how easily you think they can get away. If you don't think it's worth ignite. Now, a lot of times I will ignite just to force them to flash. A little bit of mind gamey, but they see themselves ignited. They assume you know you're going for the kill. And it's simply a Q, and then our 3 Hail Blades. Granted, okay, so you gotta think this is 0 armor, but 423 damage there. And a lot of times if you get it right, you can kind of walk with them in between your autos, even your Halo Blade ones, when you get used to it. And you usually can get 1 or 2 more autos out, and that's when usually they'll flash.
So that's the level 1, and you pretty much always should be trying to do a level 1 as Pyke. There's very few matchups. I'm off the top of my head, I'm thinking maybe a Moo who might like pose a threat level 1 depending on the 80 carries. The next thing we're going to talk about is the combo we showed earlier, which is simply dashing, charging your Q, flashing your E, and then Q2 backwards. That gets you a lot of your kills because at that point you're here, you're autoing them, your 80 carries autoing them, hopefully walking up between their autos. Even if they flash to right about here, or right about here, you're easily there to finish up with autos. So that's a big kill opportunity. Another common thing is if you push them off the wave level 1, they give it completely. The wave ends up shoving all the way in, and you kind of just got some lull time. This is a good opportunity for your first roam of the game. A lot of times you'll be level 2 at this point. I'm level 3 because of the solo XP. You should be at least step into this bush. You don't have to full commit the roam if you're unsure. At least walk around, walk in this bush, and then you check mid. See if the mid matchup, see the wave state, see if it's worth walking up, see the jungle matchup, see where, start thinking about where the junglers could be, look where your jungler is, get a feel for the game at that point. You have two options. The wave, you'll usually pull back and get stuck right about here. You can easily go for an EQ here if you're comfortable with it, which you really need to practice that because it's a very easy and common way to get kills in lane as Pyke, is that because most people don't suspect it. They have no idea you're in this bush, so you could be here, and then you just appear right here with probably like a 50-50 hook chance. So you really need to practice this and get comfortable with it. See, even there I messed it up, but you should try to do it as fluently as possible. As far as like roams, that is probably the most common early one, the level 2 one. It usually happens if you have an 80 carry such as like Tristana or Draven that has to push the wave basically, or they want to get their stacks. In Draven's case, it's going to crash into their tower. You're going to win the level 1. It's going to crash onto their tower. You're going to have downtime. If you do it, make sure you consider what threat your 80 carry is in. If he goes up to like Lassent, and then you need to consider if he is in threat, is it worth him missing like the 2 CS for you to go burn mid's flash and such. Other than that, the wave will bounce back here, and on the next wave, it'll bounce back here. When it comes back here, on that following wave, you have an opportunity, right? Because if you're back here in time for this, you can keep them from shoving it all the way in, and then you'll have a pull towards your lane, and usually your 80 carry will eventually get it to like right here. And once it's right here, as long as you're here to keep the enemy support and 80 carry from shoving it all the way in, then you're in a really good spot, right? Because they probably have blown sums level 1 or level 2. The wave's on your side, but it's frozen. They are consistently a danger. They pretty much have to have jungle help. The map is yours at that point, because if they're playing too far back and giving it up, you can do a sneaky recall and go into your boot buy at level 3, which is very, very common. I do this often. If the wave's just sitting here and they're like way up here and there's a chance of their jungler being here, I won't take that risk. I'll simply go take my boot buy and then walk usually to right about here. And as I'm walking, as my champion is walking there, I'm checking the lanes, seeing if I am needed elsewhere, if I need to go fix a wave, or if there's a member of my team in a bad position, so I need to go help them just secure their wave and be less at risk while they do it, or if there's a gank opportunity, right? So all your roams don't have to be for kills. They can very much just be for fixing waves and XP reasons. If you do roam and you get a kill, make sure you're using your stacks to help push the wave in, because that's where you get a lot of your XP a lot of times when you're roaming as support. So make sure you're doing that. Just be aware, if you spend too long off, the thing you're risking perhaps is a lot of times the 80 carry and support will come back and they'll shove your 80 carry off and they'll crash this wave. Your 80 carry won't lose any farm, so it's not a loss, but you do lose your freeze in the punish you had on them from having that freeze. So it's always a risk versus reward situation. You need to weigh it a bit. Sometimes it's better for you to just, you'll take a look around and be like, nope, and you'll just walk straight back bot. If the wave's still right around here, I like to come in through here, through my jungle, and just play the side. As you climb higher and higher, when you start playing the side of the lane, your 80 carry will know to like start moving up with you, because you want to be parallel, obviously. There's plenty of videos discussing that, but So hopefully your AD carry walks up. If not, just let them, if the enemy walks towards you, you can easily walk away, right? You're easily safe right here, and you're playing the side of the lane and just putting as much pressure as possible on the game at any given moment. Because that's really the goal at the end of it, is put as much pressure on the game in as many forms as possible. Because that's when mistakes happen. Those are what I like to call forced error. If you ever watch sports, very common saying. And basically that's how you force your opponent to make mistakes. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is right around this time, you'll probably be like level 5, and you're going to be sitting at the point where you can get Mobies, right? And it's always the decision whether or not you should buy Mobies or just tier 1 boots and long swords. And I'll give you a general rundown of some of the ideas that go through my head. Personally, if I'm hard winning the lane, if they're like already like 0-2, 0-3, I'm more likely to buy Mobies. For one, I don't need the extra AD to win the lane more. For two, they're worth reduced gold. And for three, I'm spreading my gold across the map more with that purchase. Another case on the opposite end is if we're hard losing bot, Mobies obviously can help you kind of recover the game and kind of recover your early game that's supposed to be strong. You can get around, help your jungler, influence the map. Don't waste your best time, your champ's strongest moments in the game, just stuck in bot lane. If the lane's a little bit even, or if it's going back and forth, or the junglers are playing bot half or dragons, a lot of times going towards the early Dirk is super strong, and tier 1 boots will still get you enough move speed for your W's and stuff and your E's. So test it out, have a thought when you do buy it, a reasoning, and then just after the end of the game, just consider, was it the right call, right? And that's how you really improve, because you have to make an active decision, or else you will never remember why or when you did something, and whether or not, like, you can't learn from it if you don't actually know why you did it, right? So just have a reasoning, make a choice, and then just go over it at the end. We're going to kind of go over how you position in team fights this Pyke. The general rule of thumb is you never want to be with your team. Your only goal at that point is trying to kind of hook a carry as they walk up to throw some kind of ability or auto attack. And it's very unlikely. You kind of have to do it during their animations. It takes a lot of practice, but it's not the ideal way. So the goal is, if I can have you imagine that your team's over here, their team's over here, and the zones of influence are, kind of down the middle and kind of pushing. Zone of influence, this is all safe for them. But, if you're over here, this is all takeable, right? This guy could easily move over here and all this and kind of put pressure on the sides. Well, you kind of want to be that person. You want to be on the sides or even behind the enemy team at times. And you're looking for hooks, like if this guy is walking this way for go shot this way, you can kind of go past him towards the back line. You're looking for stuff like that. You always want to be on the sides, but you can even use your abilities to reposition if you need to. Again, like they see this, they know where you are, at least the general direction. So just really try to put pressure on the team fight without actually being engaged. The only time you're really engaged is, like, say you're putting pressure back here, their carries are stepping towards you and stuff, and you're pulling them back, and then their front line's getting hit by your front line or back line. A lot of times, if a frontliner gets low, you can easily kind of go for something and go for an execute and stun, drag an E-stun across their back line into a Q. That's a very common way for you to engage. Other than that, you really need to wait for someone else. You don't have the health pool, and even with a ton of tenacity, you risk just straight up dying. So you have to be really careful. A lot of times, you can use the edges of walls to go for sneaky hooks, and even that, you hit that hook, like maybe someone walks back towards you thinking, oh god, I need to save this person, and then your team has like a free shot at someone else. You never know, right? The goal is just consistently putting pressure and consistently lowering their safe area and increasing your zone of influence of your team, right? You have your W, you have your E to get away, you even have your ult to get away if you need to. There's plenty of ways to get out. We talked about using the ult to jump over walls, and we talked about the many movement abilities, right? So you have to use the kit to the best of your ability to really put pressure on fights. It's all about pressure. I know I say it over and over again. That's really how you cause mistakes, and that's kind of your goal. So late game vision, obviously it's around Baron mainly, sometimes Drake. Obviously the most common Baron wards that are really, really good. is if you can get it, this one, because you see the approach more than this. This doesn't show the whole approach. This just shows this once they get into this bush. This gives you much more range and much more warning. A lot of times this bush will be pinked. So what I like to do is a lot of times I drop a ward right here. It's right outside of the pink range, but you can see it curves right here, and they can't sneak by it in any way, but it won't be in range of that pink. This is the most, usually the farthest you can get if this is pinked, because if this is pinked, you're never going to easily clear it without your team's help. Obviously, you'd want Baron Pit pinked, but sometimes, you know, it's cleared, or, you know, they have a ton of vision to get through before they get there. So this is a good pink. Even back here is sometimes good if you think a jungler will come this way, depending on which jungler it is. The last thing I want to talk about the late game vision warning and stuff, and even the mid game and early game, is when you have Umbral, when to sweep first so your Umbral doesn't proc, and when to just let Umbral proc. And the general rule of thumb is you always want to sweep if you're face checking into enemy territory. If there's an enemy in the bush and you have Umbral and there's a ward on top of them, when you walk up, you'll get the little eyeball and it'll show the ward. But you won't know the enemy is there. If you do sweep, you can do something like this and see their outline. And you should always approach the bushes in a way that you're safe as possible. So for like example right here, walking into the Raptors could block a skill shot, and I'm on the edge and I can easily get out, right? So if I'm sweeping this, a lot of times I'll do like this and do like that. That way I have the wall. Whatever way is the safest, right? Whatever way is the safest. You'll get used to it as you do it more, and you'll get used to the range of the sweep and kind of sitting on the edge of it to really check bushes with it. Simple, but important. Hey everyone, that's the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. If you have a support you want to see next, make sure you let me know down in the comments below, because we are going to do another video, another guide coming up, but wherever we start will be based off the comments and feedback you guys give me. If you want to see everything you learned today live, or if you just have more questions in general about the support role, make sure to check out my Twitch down below. Catch me live and ask me there, and we'll be sure to answer any questions or explain and show you more examples of anything you've seen. Thank you guys again. Y'all have a wonderful day. Hey, buddy. Hey. Hey. You're interrupting recording time. Recording time. Let's just have you talking to the mic. You probably do it better anyway. Come on, here you go. What do you have to say to your fans? What's the secret to success? What's the 3 numbers in the back of your credit card? Okay, or just push the microphone around. I can't hold you right now.